Evening, everyone. This is the Board of Selectmen meeting for Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018. And we have a new Board of Selectmen, and we have an expanded Board of Selectmen with 5 members. We thought we might start by introducing ourselves. I'm Katie Conlon. I'm the Secretary of the Board. Why don't we go this way, and then we'll come to my left.
Richard Wells, I'm a member of the board.
Mike Zulis, member of the board.
Melinda Collins, member of the board.
Tony Farrington, member.
And we have our...
Mike Dennehy, town administrator.
I can talk.
Emily Martin, Executive Secretary.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We're going to start with some meeting minutes.
So just a point of order. Most people know our chair, David Burns, has left the board. Katie, as secretary of the board, is acting as chair, but I'd like to make a motion to make this official until we get to our reorganization after town meeting to make Katie Connell acting chair of the Board of Selectmen until after the town meeting of 2018. So our next week, we have a future reorganization. You can pick a date if you want.
Okay, well, why don't we cover that when we get to the future meeting date? So I'll accept. We have a second then for the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Congrats.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll discuss it a little more when we get to our reorganization and our restructuring discussion later on in the agenda, but we're going to have a discussion about many issues relating to restructuring and 5 members a little bit later this evening. So the first item on our agenda is meeting minutes from March 12th and March 28th, 2018.
So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 12, 2018 and March 28, 2018 as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? I know some of you were not on the board when the minutes were written and when the meetings were held. So, yes.
Actually, I'll just say I typically would abstain if I'm not at the meeting, but for the purposes of making sure we get a majority here, depending on what is a majority under our rules, if both of you indicate that this reflects the minutes, I'm happy to vote in favor.
I believe the minutes are accurate. I have no
they
further changes. Okay. Thank you. So do we have seeing no other discussion, all in favor of approving the meeting minutes of March 12th and March 28th, 2018?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Future meeting dates. We are scheduled to go into town meeting starting on Monday evening, May 7th, and we don't know how long town meeting will go. We're expecting at least Monday, May 7th, and Tuesday, May 8th, and town meeting is also scheduled for Thursday, May 10th, if needed. So the board would normally meet prior to town meeting. Is there a preference that anyone might have in terms of work schedules, whether we meet at, say, 6:30 or 6? I think we might need at least an hour for the first night. We could make it a shorter meeting the second night, unless we have anything pressing for the agenda, and I don't believe that's the case. Is 6:30 convenient for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we schedule for 6:30 on Monday and Tuesday evening? And then we'll then need to schedule, we could probably take it up on Monday evening, what our first meeting in May would be after town meeting. Do we have anyone tonight for citizen speak? And I know that some of you may be here to speak about 193 Central Avenue. We're going to ask you to address that when we get to that item on the agenda. So is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak at Citizen Speak? Yes. Please, right over to this microphone here.
And Emily will have, if you are going to speak, Emily will have a sign-up sheet. You can just sign your name and your address on the sheet. We'll just do that.
And for the record, we'll just need your name and address.
Sure. So my name is Regina Malley, 18 Lyman Road. I'm currently the chairman of the Park Commissioner Board, and tonight I'm here to read a statement from the Milton Youth Advocates group that has formed. It's a resident group, and they are focused on teen programming and ultimately a teen center. So I'm reading this on behalf of Sarah Callahan, who is the founder of this group, who couldn't be here tonight. So I'll just read the statement for her. So Sarah Callahan is the founding member of the Milton Youth Advocates. Our group came together to talk about and begin to address the lack of teen programming in Milton. We're a diverse community-based group whose members come from all backgrounds and have a wide array of professional and personal experiences that make us commit to this issue. We come from all parts of the town, and at our last meeting we had over 20 members formalized our group name, and we divided into 2 subcommittees and adopted a mission statement. We also have a large group of youth who are joining us on this journey. So the mission statement of the Milton Youth Advocates is that the Milton Youth Advocates is a collaboration of Milton organizations and residents of all ages and backgrounds who are committed to working together to create positive and safe out-of-school opportunities for youth to socialize, relax, be creative, have fun, and get the support they need to thrive in our community. Since we began meeting in November, we've had conversations with a wide array of community members, parents, youth, educators, clergy, town department heads and staff, elected officials, community nonprofits, and professionals who work with youth and are familiar with the risks that they face. The key takeaway from all these conversations is the enthusiasm and excitement that everyone feels about looking at the need for youth programming and a possible youth center here in Milton. Everyone says, that is so great, we desperately need a youth center, how can we get involved? So our group is committed to working together across all parts of our community to ensure that we address the needs of our youth and our teens. We know that the Board of Selectmen have committed to forming a youth task force, and we look forward to sharing our knowledge and perspective with the town officials to help inform that work. Milton Youth Advocates has done some preliminary work to put together a needs analysis. We have distributed a Milton Teen Survey to all students at Pierce and at the high school, and are looking forward to seeing the results. The earliest findings corroborates the anecdotal evidence we have that teens today are stressed and overwhelmed by the busyness of their lives, the social and academic pressures that they face. They experience higher rates of depression and anxiety than we've ever seen, and they really lack downtime. So Milton is no different, and our first round of the survey results have shown us that they really want a place to hang out and relax. Milton Youth Advocates is committed first and foremost to making this process a wholly inclusive one, and we're willing to work with our town officials and their task force to ensure this. We're committed to ensuring that the voices of students are heard loud and clear, and that this really be a youth-centric process. So in the coming days and weeks, the group is going to be inviting the public to sign on to this mission statement, create their identity as Milton Youth Advocates, and this is going to be primarily through a Facebook page where they're going to, set that up and kind of gain interest and get input from the rest of the town. It was important to mention too that this speech was given to the Master Planning Implementation Committee on Monday night. I spoke about it at the Park Commissioner meeting last night, and we have another person over at the school committee meeting tonight kind of giving the same message. That's kind of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but really just wanted to take the opportunity to come out and make a statement that this group is formed, we have a name, Parks and Rec is fully supportive of it, and we look forward to working with the Board of Selectmen on this issue.
Thank you, Regina.
Yeah, thank you.
We don't normally take questions during citizen speak,
fine.
but, Regina's here as an elected park commissioner, and is there anyone who might have a brief question or comment for Regina? This was a topic a few weeks ago during the campaign, I know, so been discussed in many circles. And there's probably a lot we can talk about when we get to other portions of the agenda, unless anyone has a comment this evening.
Leave your phone number, we'll be calling you.
Okay, no problem.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
yes,
one
Mr.
second.
Denby.
When we had met about a month ago with Sarah Callahan and this group, before they formalized themselves, they had talked about potentially putting a survey out there,
Yes.
and we were going to publicate that
Yes.
on the town's website. Is that still something that's?
The survey has gone out to all of the high school students. There was a little bit of a delay with getting it out with the middle school, but that's in process now.
Okay.
So right now, I think it was pretty low response rate. I think it was around 30%. But early results are saying that kids are really interested in an actual place.
Great.
So they do have the option to rank, programming, what they're interested in. And one of the top things was actually life skills, which I thought was awesome. So we're getting there, but we do need to promote the survey more. So if you have students in the high school, make sure that you're telling them about the survey and that it's out there. The school is communicating it. And Pierce, we're nearly there, I think, with getting it
That was my
issued.
question. So you're going to do both, right?
Doing
Because
both.
PS is, from my point of view, PS, and from what's been brought forward to us already, just operation, PS is critical.
Absolutely.
PS is critical.
So let us know if the town IT department or if I can
Help.
help in
Okay.
getting that word out with the survey.
Sure, thank you very
Mr. Zulus
much.
had his hand up also.
Regina, do the advocates have a view about how they might work with a committee or the task force that is charged by this board?
I think they would love to be a part of that task force. Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Regina.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else this evening for citizen speak on a topic other than 193 Central Avenue? Okay, seeing none, then the next item on our agenda is a common Vittler license application, and we're joined by Karen Collins and Kim Earhart. Hope I pronounced that correctly. So please come up to the, we should have 2 seats there at the table. We may have, we have 2, did we take one away?
Nope.
Good. Good evening.
Good evening. To introduce myself, I'm Karen Collins, and this is Kim Earhart. So recently, we won the bid to run the concession stand at Houghton's Pond facility. At the same time, we also got the bid to run the DCR up at the other DCR property, the Pongapog Golf Course. So we're going to be doing both locations at the same time. So we're looking forward to it. We know that I think there were some challenges maybe last year from what we were hearing from the DCR with the amount of hours that the property was open, and we hope to take care of that. So our plan is to be there specifically now on the weekends where the warm weather is great, and then as soon as the summer really kicks in, we'll be there from 7 in the morning until dusk. Our plan is to serve beverages, small breakfast items such as bagels and sandwiches, assortment of pastries in the morning, and then we'll convert to hot dogs. Everything is all about cotton candy and ice cream and popsicles and slush, those types of items and beverages and stuff. We've been up there recently going through the kitchen and looking around, and we see that there's also a need to serve some sundry items such as swim diapers, which we know will come in the summertime, but also dog treats and fishing gear, so if we can have little nets and things for the kids to go fishing. We plan to have like a little side store as well to serve, to try to serve the public with buckets and pails and things like that for the beach as well. So that's our plan, and right now we're moving very fast ahead, trying to get all our equipment in and get the place really cleaned up, so we've got a plethora of meetings over the course of the next couple of days to hopefully wrap all of those things out. I don't know if you'd like to add anything else.
No, she did really good. That was just really good. She hit it all. I was there today, early this morning, and just about the fishing. One gentleman that's been going there for 40 years, he mentioned, will you please, he wants just to have tackle and just hooks. He said everyone's always looking for them, so we're like, of course we're gonna have, so just a little aside. But yeah, she just explained it perfectly. We're very excited.
So
We have
very
a lot
excited.
of energy.
Yes.
And it seems like it's gonna be a great fit for us.
Okay, well, we have your application, everyone's had a chance to review the paperwork. I know you paid the filing fee. The common vic license is for anyone serving food with a seating capacity, and I understand you're gonna be before the Board of Health within the next few days, meeting with them.
Yes.
Which
We're meeting
would
with
also,
Erin tomorrow,
approval
yep.
by the Board of Health would also
Yep.
be required.
Yes, 100%.
So does anyone on the board have comments or questions for Karen or Kim, or both?
I was there today, this afternoon, you would have done well there this afternoon.
Oh, that's
It
I
was
right.
packed.
honestly, all last
was-
weekend, last weekend was kind of rainy, but the weekend before, it was just a mob scene, and everybody was coming up to us saying, when are you opening? When are you opening? So,
And I was there this morning, it was crazy.
we're very excited and looking forward to opening as soon as we can.
I said, so you're gonna call it the Pondview Pavilion?
The Pondview Pavilion,
What was it? It was what was the
It
name?
was Jenna's
Place,
Place.
yeah, Jenna's Place, yeah.
yeah, yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Just a quick question. I noticed that the DCR temporary license went through October 31st, and this is supposed to go through December 31st, and I didn't know if it made sense to make them coterminous.
That was a temporary one that she wrote for us to get in, so that we could get in front of the board today. But they are gonna rewrite that, so it will potentially go through December 31st for that property, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because we do realize that they'll have snowshoes and, trackers that go through there in the wintertime as well. We could potentially be open on the weekends, hot chocolate and coffee and things of that nature, so yes.
So you expect it to be December 31st from the DCR as
Correct,
well?
yes,
Great.
yes. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Anyone? Okay, then if not, would anyone like to make a motion? We do have a proposed draft motion.
Sure, I'll move
Get
to.
used to it.
We'll go right into it. I'll move to approve the 2018 common victual license for K&K Kitchens, et cetera, LLC, DBA Pondview Pavilion at 840 Hillside Street, valid through December 31st, 2018.
Second.
Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? And if not, all in favor?
Good luck.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to item 6 on our agenda, which is a conference with Peter Kelly and his attorney Ned Corcoran regarding 193 Central Avenue, the former site of the Milton Huzik Club. And just for the benefit of our new members, the prior board, about, would you say 2 months ago, Richard? Maybe 2 months ago, had a meeting with Mr. Kelly and with Ned Corcoran, his attorney, and also with some abutters and neighbors to the property who came and spoke and gave us some input. We have received a number of letters on both sides, some supportive of the application that will be before the Board of Appeals tomorrow evening, and some in opposition. We have some people here this evening. Let me just clarify before Mr. Corcoran starts his presentation. For the benefit of those watching, we are not the special permit granting authority. That is the Board of Appeals. So Mr. Corcoran is asked to come in and give a presentation and to see whether this board may want to weigh in on the application, possibly take a position. We may want to do any number of things, including taking it under advisement, making any kind of a vote. So we can decide that after we hear the presentation. And with the board's agreement, I think where we have some people here who may want to speak, I thought after the presentation, we should probably give the people who are here a few minutes each to address the board, whether in support or in opposition, and then we can decide what, if anything, we would like to, what, if any, action we may want to take.
Yes.
Okay, does that work?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Corcoran.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of the board. First, let me congratulate the 3 new members and welcome. God bless you for stepping up to take on a role overseeing the governance of the town. It is an awesome thing, and I appreciate the fact that you do it. And I look forward to being before you many times over the next number of years that you will be serving. As indicated, I am Ned Corcoran. I am an attorney based in Quincy. I live here in Milton, and I've been retained by Peter Kelly, his wife Rosemary, daughter Kristen, and to seek a permit to allow the reuse of the former Milton Huzik Club. I know we were here in February. There have been a number of things that have happened since I made a presentation to this board, the former board, in February, including some large neighborhood meetings, some smaller neighbor meetings, conversations with some of the direct abutters. And we know that the neighborhood is split, and we know that the direct abutters are split. There are 5 or 6 direct abutters who are wholly supportive as a result of, based on an outcome of negotiations that we've undertaken with them relative to a set of conditions that we would agree to have imposed within a special permit if a special permit were to be granted. And there are others that, quite frankly, and I understand completely their concerns, that we ought not to be providing opportunity for the sins of the past to be replicated in the future. As I've come to understand it and listen carefully, it sounds like the former owner of the property, the Milton Huzik Club, on its way out the door over the last several years at least, did not pay careful attention to its neighbors and did not pay attention to things like noise, parking, trash, and things like that. And Peter has put together a management plan. We've got a set of conditions that would specifically address those issues that that obviously Peter has agreed to in respect to that. And we're going to be asking this board, obviously, for support and asking the Board of Appeals to grant a special permit to allow him to operate for at least a probationary period. So a couple of things I think, bigger picture, important. Peter and his family have been in Milton for at least 50 years. He is a businessman, a realtor here in town, very well known, and has fallen in love with this building. When he came to me a year ago to purchase it, We didn't talk much about what his goals for the property were. He saw it as an opportunity to do something positive. But I think over that year that we were waiting to close on the property, and since, he really fell in love with the building, the possibilities for the building to provide function space for events here in town and whatnot. So he has formed the Milton Club, Inc., which is a nonprofit club corporation established under the Massachusetts general laws for the purpose of providing a place for its membership and providing opportunity for the long-term preservation of this historic asset. This building was built, I learned since I was last before you, that it was built in 1913, not 1933, as the town's assessor's records indicate. And it is listed as a significant structure in the Columbine Rocks Historic District. That area of the Columbine Cliffs is a historic district recognized by the State Historical Commission, the Town's Historical Commission, and this is one of those structures that is indicated as an important and significant structure relative to that historic district. It is a historic building. It is protected by the town's historic demolition bylaw and would be subject to at least delay and a requirement that we seek to perform some ability to retain the building, if possible, before a demolition could occur. And that would be a process that would involve the Historical Commission, obviously. We've been before the Historical Commission. They have simply voted that the building ought to be preserved if possible. They've taken no position relative to the uses that are being proposed and whether or not they're appropriate as a means to facilitate the preservation. In my opinion, the uses as being proposed by Mr. Kelly are the best way to assure the preservation of that building, particularly in its current setting. I have a brief video slideshow to show the interior of the first floor, the work that Peter has done since he purchased the building. It takes about 2 minutes, and then I'll move forward with my argument. So Peter has spent a significant amount of money on cosmetic improvements to the facility. This is the main entry way with a piano as you step in. Looking back out at the front door. This is one of the smaller reception rooms off to the left-hand side of the building, set for a nice formal dining. You know, members of the club could host a small gathering at the club to be catered, and that might be the location where you might sit. This is the grand ballroom. It is a magnificent ballroom. I know that the 2 large neighbor meetings we hosted were in this ballroom. There's a stage at the far end where the former the Husick Club conducted all sorts of theater and other events, and many Miltonians have taken advantage of various functions that have been hosted in this ballroom, whether it's functions for PTOs, the Milton Hospital, galas have been held here, and other functions similar to that. This is the secondary reception room off to the right-hand side of the ballroom, where smaller receptions have been held in the past and could be held, obviously, going forward. And that's it. So, property, as I showed earlier, I don't have a separate slideshow to show the overview of the property. The property contains about 71,000 square feet. It fronts on Central Avenue and also fronts on Columbine Road. It is within a Residence B zoning district. Residence B allows the creation of lots that are 20,000 square feet or more and have frontage on a road of 125 feet. In this case, it's possible to create 3 lots as an alternative use. If the building were torn down, could be replaced. One of the uses could be the sale of 3 lots. Peter's created an initial plan, has not been endorsed or recorded, but has been approved by the planning board to create 2 lots and a smaller parcel. There is one of the supporters and a direct abutter, the Atwoods. Peter settled an eminent domain lawsuit, adverse possession lawsuit, that had been filed by them against the former owner for a triangular portion of the property at the far end of the property. Peter's agreed to deed that property to the Atwoods. So they've created about a 7,200 square foot parcel that would not be a buildable lot on its own, but would be combined with the Atwoods property. Separately, he's created, the plan authorized the creation of a 20,000 plus square foot lot that could be sold if Peter determines it's necessary to sell the lot in order to bring down the cost of the acquisition of the property and the operation. He hasn't made that decision to sell yet, but the opportunity is there if it's necessary. There are 2 sort of fundamental, and then the remaining lot is about 43,000 square feet and contains the existing clubhouse. The clubhouse is a fairly large building that sits sort of triangular to the, it's not square to the property, and it contains a footprint of about 12,000 square feet. There is the significant first floor, as you saw on the slideshow, and then there is a basement that's equivalent area that was used as a combination of things by the club. There were bowling alleys, there were squash courts, there was storage, boiler room, etc. And Peter is working with an architect on a plan to develop about 8,000 square feet, which would be leased to educational nonprofit entities for their purpose if we move forward. The leasing of space to nonprofit educational is exempt from zoning under the Dover Amendment, and so that would be a component of activity that would be included. And that was an important consideration for some of the neighbors who have agreed to support this development, because it's an opportunity for after-school educational uses, after-school theater, art, and other things as a community benefit. And they thought that was an important component of Peter's plan. There was some real reticence early on when the plan was to seek a permit for the first floor, and then maybe we'll come back later and talk about what we'd do downstairs. And I think when Peter committed the notion of advancing the development of the basement for those purposes and invest in handicapped accessibility with an elevator and other things, a significant investment, that was something that was important to some of the direct abutters. I know, for example, that the Zucker, Delabovis, J.P. Plunkett, and the Russells, all of whom live directly across Central Avenue, were they thought that was important, and they have wholeheartedly endorsed this plan. They're not here tonight, but they've authorized me to represent that support, and they'll be there tomorrow evening when we go forward with the hearing. So Peter's plan, as I said, is to restore the downstairs for educational purposes, and the upstairs is really to operate as a club. He's formed a club. The club is open to membership to residents of the town of Milton. Its purpose is to provide a place for residents of the town to gather, but also to generate revenue to see the preservation of this community asset. It really is, we think, a community asset worthy of preservation, and so that's the plan. We've agreed, I know I've submitted to you, and we will be submitting to the Board of Appeals a significant set of proposed conditions that Peter is willing to operate, and we think are important, and we think respond to the legitimate issues and concerns of those who would seek to oppose this. We understand why they may feel that they cannot support, but we're asking, as I say, we're going to ask the town on a probationary basis to support this plan as an opportunity for Peter to demonstrate that he can operate in a way that is far better than what was the operation of the premises under the former ownership, and that he can do so in a way that's respectful of the neighborhood, the neighbors, and would be worthy of a renewal of a permit if the permit were to be, if the application would be filed for renewal. And so, in that regard, I'll just quickly highlight the conditions that have been agreed to. One, there will be a business office within the building that shall be staffed during business hours, and there will be an event manager supervisor on site during all evening and weekend events. Direct abutters, other neighbors, and building commissioner will be provided with the cell phone numbers for the manager and the supervisor. If there's any incident, anything happening on the spot, there's someone on the spot to make sure that they are responding to those concerns. The big issue, one of the big issues, I think, is weddings and events, significant events on Friday and Saturday evenings. Weddings and other ceremonies that might be held on weekends may be held outdoors on the patio area or on the lawn area, and there may be an initial outdoor cocktail reception, provided that activities, including dancing and dining, shall be moved inside the building no later than a time certain. We're proposing 9 o'clock would be that time. It's been suggested that we should think about 8 o'clock. I think that's not an unreasonable thing to think about, but we're thinking about that as an alternative. Certainly the mosquitoes in the summer are out by 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you probably want to be indoors in any event. No outdoor music or other use of amplified sound to be allowed after that time. The ballroom doors and windows to remain closed at all times when there is any music, amplified sound, or other performance occurring inside. Weddings and other events shall be limited in size to a maximum of a certain number of persons. The capacity of the building is somewhere north of 200. We're suggesting the 175 probably is a reasonable cap on the size of a wedding that could go. Events on Fridays would close by 10, with lights out by 11, probably restricting the notion of wedding events on a Friday evening. And Saturdays should close by 11 with lights out by midnight. Events held Sunday through Thursday, all Sundays, not just, and previously we talked about maybe a Sunday evening of a 3-day weekend, holiday weekend, might be allowed to go to 11. Peter's agreed that on those evenings, the lights would be out by 9. Events closed by 9, lights out by 10. Events with 100 patrons or more shall require a police detail and parking staff to manage parking and safe pedestrian access to and from Central Avenue. Police detail and the parking staff shall be on duty at least 30 minutes before the scheduled start time of an event and for at least 30 minutes after the closing of that event to ensure that people are leaving safely, they're leaving properly. In addition, there'll be valet parking service, and we're going to be meeting with the Parks Department with a request to consider satellite parking with valet parking down at the Turner Pond parking lot, which is about 300 or 400 yards down the road. Going to be an easy access to get to that. Events with fewer than 100 patrons shall have the parking staff, may not need the police detail. Cones and other signs should be provided as well to ensure that there's no parking in front of abutters' driveways on Central Avenue, and there is no parking allowed on Columbine Road, as I understand it, but I think some patrons do tend to park on Columbine Road, and that parking would be enforced. We'd ask for assistance from the police department, but our parking staff would be on site to enforce that no parking as well. There'll be a cleaning crew on duty to police the area for litter and other debris that may be attempted to be strewn by patrons immediately after the close of an event. So that crew would be in addition to the parking crew, making sure that they're out and paying attention to, as people are leaving, that they're probably disposing of things and not spreading litter, and if there is, they'll be out to pick it up. In addition, Peter has agreed that he would make the first floor space available to nonprofit entities of the town, PTOs, hospital, others, a minimum of 6 times per year for free of charge. So for a PTO fundraiser, that type of thing. It's interesting, one of the functions that has been lost was lost this year by reason of the closing of the club was the Milton Cotillion, which was a wonderful, significant event. It was 4 Friday nights in January with dancing for 3rd through 5th grade and 6th through 8th grade, I think. My kids went through it. It's a wonderful thing. They had to move to Quarry Hills this year, and they're anxious to come back. And I know that the folks are writing a letter to the Board of Appeals tomorrow, but that's one of those things that is important as a community asset. Finally, and importantly, we've agreed that the initial permit would be limited in length to 3 years with a 12-month run-out for any events that are booked prior to the expiration of the initial permit and which would not be able to be rebooked elsewhere. I think it's significant that the wedding season for 2018 is probably booked. It is unlikely that there would be any weddings booked in this calendar year. You might get a stray wedding, someone that's lost access to a venue or gets engaged and wants to have a quicker turnaround on a reception. You probably get a handful of those, but in reality, the season is booked for this year, and we're really looking at the wedding season next spring, summer, and through fall, and then the following year. So you're looking at 2 years, really, of operation, 3 years of operation, 2 in the height of what we might call wedding season on Saturday evenings through the wedding season, when Peter ought to be under close scrutiny. And Peter would need to reapply for the permit after 3 years. If the permit were denied, at least those items, those events that may have been booked beyond would be allowed to continue as long as they're within that 12-month run-out period. That was suggested by one of the abutters. We thought that was a reasonable concession. So with those conditions and with that background, we would ask the board tonight, I know it's difficult, you're all just elected, I've been sort of waiting and waiting to figure out when you would be meeting, would you have time to meet and consider what's going on. I appreciate the fact that the 3 new members were all at least one of the large neighbor meetings to listen to the presentations and to listen to concerns. So it's not all brand new to you, but I would ask you to consider tonight whether you would vote to support the application with these conditions. I would understand if you were unable to get there tonight, and with that I would open it up to any questions that you may have of me, and I look forward to hearing from others who would speak as well.
All right, does anyone on the board have questions for Mr. Corcoran or Mr. Kelly before we allow an opportunity for anyone who's here this evening who might want to address us to speak?
I actually have a question, or just more of a wondering. There's the proposed length of the probation period is 3 years, and I'm wondering what recourse neighbors and the town have during that period if there's a difficulty meeting the conditions that have been set up in this.
My understanding that if there are issues occurring, that complaints can be filed with the building commissioner, and the building commissioner can seek a hearing with the Board of Appeals, and the Board of Appeals has the authority to suspend the permit, terminate the permit, if it determines that the that the issues and concerns is of significance to be addressed. There's always recourse. The Board of Appeals always has recourse. Others in town who have special permits are occasionally called before the board because the town receives complaints from abutters and others.
And how does that interact then with the proposed 12-month run-out? Is that?
Well, I suppose in that case, if that were to occur, and if the board would determine it was going to terminate the license, or terminate the permit, then certainly if I were representing Peter at the board, at that time, I would ask them to honor the run-out. It's one of those, I suppose, it's an insurable risk. You know, if something happens and people need to move and they're not able to move and they've got a claim against Peter for cost associated with the loss of the opportunity, I think it's an insurable risk in terms of a business operation approach.
Anyone else?
I have one question, because I don't see in your prior meeting with us, one of the things, I mean, clearly the parking, on-property parking is a mess because it's just not paved. You had suggested to us that you were going to pave it. Is that still your intention?
Yes, we're waiting anxiously for a parking plan to be developed with some, so paving of the parking area with appropriate stormwater detention and plantings along sides of the property to mask the parking, so that the parking sort of goes away visually. But yes, that's part of the plan.
How many spots, Ned?
But we're not sure. That we had a draft of a plan that we looked at that showed within the existing parking area that you could create something like 17 to 20 spaces. We think it's possible to create probably double that number on the site by coming around to the back of the building and taking up some of the green space to the front and the left, and then shielding those, if appropriate, with arborvitae treatments. But we're looking at a plan that is significantly more than what would necessarily be available now.
Yeah, that's definitely something the ZBA will want to see, but that's
Right.
something they'll want to see as part of your presentation.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mike?
Yeah, I'm looking at the document entitled Business Plan for the Milton Club and Kelly Arts and Education Center, and I wonder if you're willing to share the assumptions behind the rent number of $80,000 and the Milton Club number of $144,000.
Okay, yeah, it's $12 a foot and it's 12,000 square feet. That's the going rate today. And that's actually below the going rate for commercial space.
And so how many functions would that, how many functions
Well,
the assumption based on?
And weddings would probably take one wedding a week.
Okay.
Approximately.
Oh, go ahead. You can go ahead and finish.
Do you have anything else, Mark?
No, that's it, thank you.
If my memory is correct, September and October were the two biggest months for weddings
Mhm.
in the prior operation, if I'm correct? Those were the two biggest
Well, that
months.
would
There
be
were a few in June and July, but it seemed that the biggest bulk, as in many places in New England, was September and October.
Mhm.
But there were other functions also, like bereavement
Right.
luncheons and different kind of functions other
Right.
than that.
Yeah, there are a number of other things, you know, but a place for people to go to gather after a funeral, you know, for a luncheon type bereavement setting, that would be an opportunity to rent. There are, you know, the cotillion would rent bar and bar mitzvahs, other parties, youth parties, events. Members will, for example, I would plan to host a client appreciation event at the club as a member and pay, obviously, and hire the caterer to do that. I should say that Peter's entered into an agreement with Vance Welch, who's the owner of Abbey Park in Novara, to provide essentially exclusive catering services. Vance has applied for a caterer's liquor license. It's a state-issued license because it's not specific to a location. I know that Mary McKetchick is here, and she's representing Vance with respect to that. And then Vance would invest in the improvements to the kitchen to provide, you know, modern and good catering capability. There is no plan, there would be no plan to have a full-time bar, a full-time kitchen. There wouldn't be any event where there would be food would be provided through the caterer process.
Okay, anything, other comments or questions at this point before we ask if anyone who's here in the audience would like to speak? No?
Good for now.
Okay, could we ask you to just free up those chairs while we ask if anyone here this evening would like to address the board on this issue? Yes, sir, please come up and, when you get to the microphone, please just state your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Larry Milton, and I reside at 223 Central Avenue in Milton, and I've been there for nearly 30 years. And first of all, congratulations to the new members. I don't envy your job, having been a bit in the public sector before, and on the other side of the table, I think you have one of the hardest jobs to do in any community, and that is to resolve and referee and navigate your way through a variety of difficult issues. So I appreciate the time you're giving us, and we passed out a statement, but I'll read it into the record if I may, and then I'll add a couple of comments and answer questions if you'd like.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Kelly has stated that he wants to restore the Milton Hoosier Club to the grandeur of a century ago. A century ago, there were only 16 residential structures in the adjacent Columbine neighborhood. A century ago, Central Avenue was fairly neglected and less traveled pass-through road. Now, a century later, there are 33 residences within 300 feet of the Hoosier Club, and Central Avenue is a major thoroughfare and a cut-through high-volume road between Boston and the South Shore. So things do change within the century. And now, a century later, the Hoosier Club has a well-established reputation as a blight on the neighborhood and as a nuisance to the families that call the Columbine home. Despite Mr. Cochran's efforts, the neighborhood has been haphazardly included in Mr. Kelly's discussions, holding them during the February school vacation week or giving notice to certain abutters 24 hours before a meeting that he and Mr. Kelly convened in March. During these discussions, when they've occurred, there has been significant ambiguity about who will own the building, a nonprofit or a for-profit, what is the tax benefit for the town and that will result from these activities, and what is the business plan that he expects to generate revenue, and what are the operating plans. The one area of no ambiguity, however, has been Mr. Kelly's refusal to say that he would not move to petition the town meeting for a home rule petition that would request from the legislature a new and full-time liquor license. So one might conclude that the ultimate business plan is to open one of the biggest restaurants and bar rooms in Milton, a bar room in a widely recognized residential use zone, and a bar room business that Mr. Kelly is quite familiar with during his period of time in Quincy in the 1980s. We are here tonight to respectfully request that the Board of Selectmen withhold from endorsing the Milton Club proposal. There are important issues and many moving parts that you've just heard from Mr. Cochran: parking, valet parking, operating plans, what the planning board, in fact, may or may not have approved. So these issues include, but are not limited to, legal, environmental, structural, compliance, feasibility, and public safety. We, the neighbors, are in a discovery mode and compiling issues that must be addressed by professional experts before endorsements are entertained. We understand the applicant is under financial pressure, but that urgency is the applicant's problem and challenge, and it should not cause our town government to rush when there are critical issues and vetting to be required. Additionally, subsequent to the March Board of Selectmen meeting when this proposal was brought before you, we learned that abutters and neighbors were not aware of the proposal and were not informed of that meeting. The meeting was, of course, legally posted and conducted, but because some abutters and abutters and neighbors were not contacted and have only recently become aware, they have not had an opportunity to express their views, and we hope you'll agree that they should have an opportunity to be heard. Because a Board of Selectmen endorsement carries great weight with the Board of Appeals, it requires, we hope you agree, a full and fair consideration, which, in view of the many moving parts that are still unanswered, cannot be contemplated at this time. We believe that Town Council will need an opportunity to review some issues before the board may fully consider. I also would add, or we also would add, that we respect the zealous client advocacy, but we would appreciate that the applicant's attorney confine his representation of his client to his client only, and please refrain from making representations regarding the neighbors in the adjacent area. Thank you very much for your time and kind attention, and I'll answer any questions if you'd like.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Moulter? Yes.
I'll ask. Mr. Moulter, you noted that you're in the discovery mode, you're still learning things. Does that mean that you are, or the group is open to the possibility of a compromise here?
I don't think the group is at all open to a function and venue facility in a residential area.
Okay.
I mean, I ran the Boston Garden for 9 years. I know what it takes to run functions, and, you know, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Kelly's characterization of what a sales cycle would look like and what he expects to generate from nonprofits. He bought it for a substantial figure, and as I said in the Boston Globe, there's a substantial amount of venue activity that has to occur. The neighbors have already lived through that, and under the charter of the previous owner, they only had 35%, they were only entitled to 35% of use of their facility for public events. The aggressive nature of his business plan, which may or may not in fact be a business plan that we can all agree on, anticipates a much higher and a much more accelerated volume of events. Central Avenue is a high-speed street. And as I said, a century ago, it was an entirely different neighborhood, as was the town of Milton. And now, when you speak of a community asset, it's not buildings, it's people. The community asset is the community. You can characterize historic interest any way you want, but a community asset ends up being those families, those men and women, and those families that support the community. And what we've heard is ambiguity and a runaround when we've asked the questions, what kind of entity will own this? Now, is it an IRS certified 501(c)(3)? We don't know. What's the profit? What's the revenue distribution out of a nonprofit? So for anyone to ask for an endorsement from this board at this point in this stage of inquiry just seems to me to be rushing to judgment.
Thank you.
Hopefully I've answered your question.
You did.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Moulter before we see if anyone else would like to speak?
No, I'm
Yeah.
good.
You look like you had one.
I was thinking, but I'm gonna hold off. I'm good.
Okay.
Well, you've had experience, I'm sure, with the complaints that have come through on Central Ave from the prior owner.
Oh, I'm familiar with the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this is a family-oriented neighborhood.
I get that.
And to think that you're going to book funeral receptions there and be able to pay your nut is really just preposterous. And I would suggest that there are function halls already like Steel and Rye that do that. And their money comes from being a restaurant and a bar room. If you're serious about examining this proposal, you need to get in the weeds on what this business plan is and what the volume of venues, generation of revenues will look like. Because that's where the money is. It's not in renting out to nonprofits. Nonprofits are nonprofits. So if you have a monthly nut of $30,000, $80,000, I've heard both numbers thrown around, and you have a mortgage that's substantial, you're not doing it on non-profit events. You're doing it by booking bigger events. And the barroom business is a barroom business, which you then, as a community, open yourself up to enormous liability and risk. And quite honestly, it's not a risk that we, the neighbors, would assume ourselves. We've seen what happens when bad ownership produces bad events.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moulter. Unless anyone has any comments or questions. All right, then, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And why don't we see if there's anyone else here this evening who would like to address the board on this topic? Anyone else? Sir, did you want to come up? And again, please just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Eric Hipp. I live at 85 Columbine Road. I'm probably one of the closest abutters to the Husa Club. I've lived there since 2005, so I have a lot of experience with it. Over the years, my family and I have enjoyed many events there, from the cotillion that was mentioned earlier, to Glover School socials, neighborhood events. I think it is a valuable resource for the town, for the neighborhood, and for the town as a whole. And as mentioned, there is a historical significance to the building. In my opinion, it'd be a shame to see it torn down. I live in a house that was actually built about the same time that the club was built. There's 2 or 3 houses in the club that were all designed and built, designed by the same architect and built around the same time. And to me, that is part of the fabric of the neighborhood. Over the years, in my opinion, the events that have occurred at the Husa Club have caused minimal disruption for me and my family. Especially over the last couple of years, I think there was a change. I don't know the specifics, but my understanding is there was a change in management of the Husa Club. And this new person worked closely with the neighbors to address many of the concerns. The ones I would hear about were noise more than anything. So, it shows the importance of management working with neighbors in a situation like this. And I think, Peter has put together a good plan, and in my opinion, has worked with any of the neighbors that are willing to listen and work with him as well to figure out a way to coexist with the community. So I just want to state that I'm in support of his plan, and I hope that you'll consider supporting it as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hipp.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening who would like to address the board? Yes. Yes, sir.
My name is Dermot McGregor. I live at 216 Central Ave. I'd just like to echo what Larry had already said about the proposed use, and I'd like to just touch on a few points. I'm not sure of the lady's name at the end of the desk, but she had asked about...
That's Melinda Collins, a new member of the board.
About the license being suspended. To suspend any barroom license or liquor license is almost impossible. The event that would need to happen in order to suspend it would have to be catastrophic: loss of life, drunk driving, crashes. You are not going to lose a license based on noise. You're going to get a slap on the wrist. We are going to have no recourse here for 3 years. 3 years is ridiculous, okay? And I just wanted to echo on that point, because he had said that, we'll get suspended. A slap on the wrist is all that's going to happen. Any parking on this site, it's 1.6 acres, right? If you're going to have an event with 200 people leaving it at 12 o'clock at night, you can't expect for that not to cause any issue in our neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood. This building was put here 100 years ago. The landscape was different. Everything was different to today. This building has a future. It is historic. I just renovated 2 buildings on Central Ave, who are both historic. One built in 1828, one built in 1960 or 1986. When a historic building, gets put into a neighborhood where it should never have been put in the first place, its best and highest use is to repurpose it into the area in which it's become. We are a residential neighborhood. We are not a function hall neighborhood. We do not have parking to do this. None of this makes sense. There is plenty of options on the table to have zero impact on the neighborhood, and that is why we're not willing to compromise, because there's many options, many ways to keep the building, many ways to keep its historical look, and have zero impact on us as a whole. The Husa Club maintains its historic, use out in Canton, and it lives on. This building is a vacant building with some historic features on the outside. We can repurpose it, make it into something that fits into our neighborhood. It doesn't have 200 cars on the street on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. Doesn't have, I mean, satellite parking, I already talked to Joe Prondak about the satellite parking, and they just turned down the Milton Hospital for satellite parking over at the church. They're not going to get satellite parking here. It's merely just being thrown out there to make it look like they're working with us. Not to mind.
Quick, can I just interrupt you one second? Are you
Yeah.
saying that Joe Prondak told you that?
I'm not saying
Sounds-
anything about Joe, no. I'm just saying that I
Okay.
heard that.
I wanted to be clear on that because you just made it.
Well, I don't want to make a statement on Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's not really important. But, and if you are going to use the pond as a satellite parking, I mean, you're going to get 200 more neighbours down there saying, why you put driving cars down here at 12 o'clock at night. It's ridiculous to think that you can put 200 guests onto Central Ave at 12 o'clock at night, drunk, and expect a good outcome. It's ridiculous. And every time I talk about this, write down something that I want to say, send you guys letters. It's unrealistic. I have to ask myself, is this really happening? Are we really talking about putting a 200 guest event centre in the middle of a residential neighbourhood? I mean, it's ridiculous. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else this evening for comments to the board? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jenny Russell. I live at 190 Central. I'm directly opposite. So I have to even the score here, I think, because my wife and I are in favor of what Peter Kelly has suggested, and we're willing to give him a go. The fact that this structure and building has been there to serve the community and has had events of that size for way longer than the previous speaker has been here. We've been here since 2010 and have not had any problems at all with any events that have happened there. We are directly across the street. We find that there is tremendous opportunity for serving the youth of Milton, for serving elders, for serving the neighbors, all different kinds of classes and arts and all kinds of things that can happen. So we see it as an opportunity rather than an impediment. I would hope that we can deal with some of these compromises and not portray some fear-mongering about what potentially can happen here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Anyone else this evening who would like to be heard? Okay, seeing none, why don't we give the applicant and his attorney an opportunity to come back up, and if there's anything that you'd like to respond to or any additional information you'd like to give us, then we can get a sense of what the board's preference would be for moving forward.
I can respond to a couple of things. One, there is no intent to seek a liquor license for the operation of the club. Will not be turned into a bar. It won't be an activity. Any function that would provide alcohol would be catered, and the caterer would have that license. We'd otherwise have to come before town meeting for a home rule petition to file with the legislature. That, in my opinion, is dead on arrival. I wouldn't see that would be something that the town meeting would be willing to approve. With respect to the ownership and the entity, the entity is being formed as a nonprofit club. It may seek IRS approval under 501c7, which authorizes certain tax treatments for clubs. Clubs are allowed to conduct functions for the purpose of raising revenue to support the membership and for the benefit of the club itself. And there are rules and regulations to have to be addressed. I haven't really studied up on that yet, something I've just become aware of. But the intent is that it would be a nonprofit club, but not seeking 501c3 IRS protection. 501c3 is really necessary if you're seeking contributions from others for a significant amount, any amount, but significant amounts, and those making contributions would seek to deduct those amounts on their own tax returns. There's no intent at this point to seek that clarity. So one of the questions that was raised at at the neighborhood meetings was, well, are you going to pay taxes? What does it mean if it's a 501c3 or if it's a nonprofit? And I had thrown out the notion that, well, maybe we would be exempt. I've looked into that question more specifically. It would not be exempt. The current tax bill is approximately $24,000, and our assumption is that it would be, the town would continue to assess at least that amount, and that amount would be paid. This entity will be a tax-paying entity. So, happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Yes, Richard.
So I just have a couple points, only because clearly in my prior role, and I don't usually go there, but I was the police chief for 10 years and was familiar with the operation that was run there. I am familiar also with a caterer's license within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I don't know how you could run a barroom on a caterer's license in the Commonwealth at any location, because it's a caterer's license is specific to catered events, and it cannot be used as the primary license for any facility. So you couldn't go there and run every day and open up and people go in and buy as if the places that you referred to that are licensed. So that is one of the things. Number two, in answer to Ms. Collins' first, as far as revocation or suspension by either this board or the police department or the inspectional services in this town, I know for a fact it's something that when they need to be, they can be very aggressive on and will be whenever. And it's not, you don't need a death or an OUI. A simple fight in a facility where licenses of liquor is being served is enough to warrant suspension, and especially a hearing before the Board of Selectmen. So, and we've talked about this before.
Board of Appeals.
The Board of Appeals. We've talked about this ourselves, though, on the licensed establishments that we've licensed. We've been very, very restrictive and very conservative with them in their operations. And I would expect, even though this would not be a licensed place, it would be the same. But I just don't see the barroom part. And I think people need to be aware of that, because the thought that if I lived on Central Evans, you know, I heard that like a barroom was going to open and be open, I would have their concerns. But I think people really need to understand what, in fact, a caterer's license is and how restrictive it would be for you to use it in that manner.
Let me specifically address that.
Mr. Mulder,
No, yeah,
we'll give you a chance to, we'll give you a chance to come up to the microphone if you would like to provide some additional information. And again, I want to remind everyone, this is not a public hearing, and we are not the special permit granting authority, so this is informational for this board. Did you have anything else, Richard,
I'm
before?
good. I'm
Or
good.
why don't we give Mr. Mulder a chance to at least come up and speak to that, and then we'll have, I think there was a couple of other questions or comments from the board, and we'll then go back to Mr. Kelly.
I think there are two specific points that I'd like to make, one on the liquor license subject. When he was asked at the meeting on March 21st,
Your meeting or our meeting?
the town meeting,
Right.
excuse me, the neighborhood meeting that was hosted, Mr. Kelly was specifically asked if he would guarantee that he would not develop a home rule petition seeking a full-time liquor license at the next, or at some town meeting. And he said, no, he would not guarantee that. That's slightly different. The nuance that I heard tonight was slightly different. But he was unwilling to the neighborhood to make that representation. So as to liquor licenses, I clearly understand from my prior life,
Right.
catering license is a catering license. But given that he has had a barroom association in his past, and he has operated bar rooms, it may very well be in the back of his mind, and one scratches one's mind when he's unwilling to make that guarantee. Second, those who may be seeking an endorsement tonight, you've just heard Mr. Cochran talk about an assumption on this, an assumption on that. How can you make a ruling or an endorsement on a basis of assumptions unless town council or town administrator has dug deeper into the problem, which is what we suggested in our submitted letter, that there are ample issues that are still ambiguous here. For example, the 501c7, what does that really mean? He's not filed it yet. When does he file it? What does it do? And what's it do for the benefit of the town? So those are, I think, conditions precedent to any endorsement that a Board of Select Persons might make. And so I would ask you to consider seriously tonight not making any statement on this and let the process go forward with the Board of Appeal and let the applicant answer the questions. that need to be answered, not just for the neighborhood, but for the town. There's enormous consequences if the wrong use is put in place that goes beyond the community that lives in the Columbines. It's the entire community, and that's what your job is, and that's why I said this is a hard job you have. But I would hope that you would consider not any action given the nature of assumptions that have been presented tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mulder. Did you have anything else?
No, I just want to follow up. I can only question them on what is presented to me, so that's why I was.
I wanted to respond, so I was clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, I've lost my liquor license a number of times at the Boston Garden. I understand the importance of the licensing process.
I get that as well. Thank you.
And I also understand how the shelves move on the licensing process.
Okay, why don't we let Mr. Kelly, Mr. Corcoran rejoin us, and I think was there another comment or question? Is anyone? Okay, I thought I saw you, Mike, ready to say something.
I do have one, and I don't know if it's for Mr. Corcoran or Mr. Kelly, but in terms of the permit, I presume that all of these conditions would be written into the permit, and if these conditions weren't followed, that would be grounds to revoke the permit and to shut it down. So I guess I'm asking, I can ask Mr. Corcoran, but then I guess we'll get clarification later on from town council or perhaps from the appeals board.
No, that's absolutely correct, and that's something that often happens relative to applications for special permits and/or variances. That the Board of Appeals doesn't simply grant a special permit. It needs to do so with conditions that protect the neighborhood, and these are a set of conditions that we have worked carefully with a number of the direct abutters who are supportive as to what would be included in the special permit. And these conditions would be made a part of the special permit. Any violation of those permits of those conditions would render the permit subject to revocation or other action as the Board of Appeals and the town would determine to be appropriate.
Okay, anyone else, questions or comments? Okay, so we're about an hour into this discussion, and we do have some other items on our agenda this evening that are important for us to get to as a brand-new board that needs to talk about some of our next steps and where we go. What is the sense of the board? We've heard some information presented by the applicant, who's, again, an applicant to the Board of Appeals and not to this board, and we've heard some neighbors and abutters who've given some information and considerations that they'd like us to take into consideration. Mr. Corcoran has asked us to take a position on this. This is our first meeting as a brand-new board, and I want to get a sense of what the board's wishes might be this evening, whether we want to have any discussion of this matter.
So I'd like to make a motion that, because of a lot of reasons. One, we have a brand-new board, you have 3 brand-new members, and just a lot. And we talked about this, there's a lot to put on you in your first meeting. In deference to both sides, those who are so in favor of this and those who have concerns, I'd like to make a motion that at this point we take it on advisement and let it go through the process, let the ZBA hear this, let them hear it, and then if they choose to come back before us after the ZBA rules and has a full hearing on this and makes a determination, and they want to come back before us again, we're always open to communication and listening to everything. That would be the motion I'd make, that we just take it on advisement at this time.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
All right, seconded. So for discussion, I just want to clarify. So I guess if the Board of Appeals were to make a decision on the application that's pending before them, there probably would really not be a reason to come back to this board. So by taking it under advisement, we could potentially discuss it again at a future meeting. The Board of Appeals is meeting tomorrow evening. It may be that they will have a discussion, need some more information, continue it. I don't know if they'll act tomorrow evening. So by taking it under advisement, we could schedule this for follow-up discussion at a future date that we think might make sense, especially if there's more information that comes out of tomorrow evening's process.
That's exactly the point that I'm doing that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we have a motion that's been made and seconded to take this matter under advisement. Any discussion? Then all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, unanimous.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming this evening. All right, we are now on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is a discussion about the restructuring of the board and the fact that we now have 5 members, and we have some opportunities that a 3-member board did not have. And we have our town council, John Flynn, who is here in the room with us, and why don't we invite Mr. Flynn to come up to the table and join us. He may want to take part in some or all of this discussion with us.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, John.
Good evening. We have John staying with us also for item number 8, which is discussion of the town meeting articles. So, now that we have all of us together for our first organizational meeting, we've discussed at the beginning of the meeting reorganizing the officers of the board after town meeting. Richard and I had a conversation about procedure and going into the next couple of days with our schedule next week for town meeting. And just for informational purposes, about 3 years ago, the board made that change to reorganize after town meeting rather than before town meeting, on the theory that whoever was the chair at the time, who was involved in a lot of the preparation and the process before the warrant committee and the budget, may probably be in the best position to address some of the articles at town meeting. So our former chair having stepped down, David Burns, we've decided that we should continue that precedent and do the formal reorganization. And it also gives us some time to get to know each other, to decide what committees we may all be interested in, what positions we may be interested in serving on, and whether we want to have, say, a chair and a vice chair, or a chair and a secretary, maybe all three. So we thought we have on the agenda a discussion of officers, new committees that we may like to form, existing committees on which the former board members were serving, and I brought a list of them to pass around so that we have a sense of at least 9 different committees that we'll all need to
Sign up for.
Yeah, some that we'll need
Be
to
nominated
replace.
for.
We'll have to fill the vacancies on the committees that Mr. Burns was serving on and decide whether we want to shift some of our roles and step on or off some of these committees. We don't have to make those decisions this evening. We can think about it and have a follow-up discussion on Monday or Tuesday if the board would like to do that.
That's a good idea. In our first town, one of our town meeting.
In the hour
meetings?
before
That's
we
a good
meet
idea.
town
That's a
meeting,
good
we
idea.
could continue the discussion. We also put on the agenda a potential for a board retreat where the board may be able to meet informally, perhaps on a Saturday, in a more comfortable, less formal setting than an evening meeting, and talk about things such as goals and objectives, or communication, or just different things that we may want to take up, which we could begin a discussion of tonight. And we also need to talk about our schedule and location of meetings, where we decided to use this room this evening to get the board off to a good start in the room where there's a little more space than what we have in the Cronin conference room, especially with 7 people around the table. It may be pretty tight. So we're going to have to focus. The prior board had some conversations about what space might be appropriate, and there were some different options, including the room that the school committee uses at the high school, this location, the Cronin rooms, possibly the Blue Room. So there's a few things for us to think about. So why don't we start off the discussion, and our town council can join us and maybe talk a little bit about, we also put open meeting law and communication as a topic we may want to speak to under this item. And in that particular one, John may have some advice for the new 5-member board now that we're operating under rules that are a little bit different than the 3-member board. So why don't we start off with a discussion of officers? Does anyone have any, Mike Zulus, having been on the school committee, you may have some thoughts on what the school committee did have a chair and a vice chair. This board, as a 3-member board, had a chair, a secretary, and a member. And the role of the secretary really was work on minutes, fill in for the chair when the chair was absent. But we're in a whole new world now.
Well, I guess one question is whether the secretary is a role that is within the bylaws, and we'd have to amend the bylaw to have something different than a secretary or a vice chair.
It's not required by the bylaws. It was set up by the board.
Okay. So I can speak from the experience on the school committee. We had, and they currently have, a chair and a vice chair. And the chair and the vice chair, the vice chair would step into the role of the chair if the chair weren't there, and could work with the chair on certain things. And on that committee, we all participated in the minutes. It wasn't left to one person. So I don't really have a preference really one way or the other in terms of titles, but, you know, that's what we did on the school committee. I was comfortable with that, but certainly open to whatever it is.
So you and I talked about this a little bit, and I did a little homework. A couple members of the Town Government Study Committee, a former selectman, a former town administrator I talked to, because and actually Katie and I talked, because I've never been secretary or chair, so I wasn't sure what, I mean, Katie as secretary really plays a significant role in the minutes, the meeting, the follow-up, which, because we only meet twice a month, it goes by so fast. It's like,
Well, just for the clarification, the minutes are taken by
Right, I know,
by Ms.
right,
Martin,
right,
and
right,
you know, we've worked just to comment on the minutes, but the minutes are written by
right, by
Ms.
Emily, I
Martin.
get that.
Yes.
So, at first, and the other thing, just, and I thought a lot about the past year, the secretary does fill in, as you are doing right now. The secretary fills in his chair when the chair's not here, and it seems to work. I don't think it matters whether it's 3 members or 5 members, but for all these years, it's worked. So, one of the things I did ask, full disclosure, both Kathy Fagan and Mr. Cronin, who both sit on the Town Government Study Committee, I wanted to know was when they were coming up with the idea of proposing the 5, did you have discussions about changing, you know, the roles or the positions? And they didn't. They didn't, and I don't even know if they had actually even thought of it, but especially in Mr. Cronin, who has, you know, so many years of the town, he finds that what we have, the current setup, seems to be pretty effective, and the only really reason to change it would be if we needed to. And maybe we should go for this year and then see, maybe address it. We may have to address it. I think there's going to be talking about, this is going to be food. I mean, we just had our first long discussion in a year. We've never been able to do this on the phone. We just, under the 3-member board, we couldn't talk. So I think that there's going to be a feeling process. I think the most important thing, and I said this, is the efficiency of keeping government moving here. There's so little time, there's so many issues, the work that's going to come on your plate so fast that I think the efficiency of keeping things moving and the continuity, that's why I said to you tonight, I want to make that motion right away, just for the continuity of this board, that there be a chair right away. And I think that's important. So that's just my own thoughts on it. I wanted to do a little bit of homework because Michael made me think about it a little bit, because it never has existed. Not in all the years I came before it, not in the year I've been on it, so that was just my thought on it.
Melinda, Tony, any preference on chair, vice chair, chair secretary, anything you'd prefer to see or not see?
Well, the title doesn't really matter to me, but I guess my real concern is that functions that need to happen, they're taken care of, and we know who's doing them, and we know what is entailed under them. That's the most important thing to me. And I'm wondering if there will be a difference between 3 and 5 members. It sounds, Richard, as if you've done enough research to say, at this point, it doesn't look like that.
Right, that was my thought, because I thought if we really needed to do it, maybe we should do it right away, like Michael and I. So I think that, and the other thing that I didn't say is, the main reason the 5 of us are here is the gentleman to my right. We have a new strong town administrator who's running the day-to-day. He's the COO of this town, and one thing that you will find out, just as Katie and I and David, when he was here, found out, he's very quick to tell you and ask you when he needs to, and he will seek your input when he wants it very quickly. But the thing that I realize the most is, it's a very busy job that he has, and I view my role here, or our role as the board, is to try and help him facilitate getting that done. That's just, I think if you would have come to us and say, I think I need this, I'd be all for it, but I haven't heard that as of yet, so I'd be willing to just kind of, I didn't find any evidence at all that when just doing my homework that made me really think, oh, yeah, we better do this at all.
Okay, so whether we keep a secretary or vice chair, maybe